Hi, Mick Cox again. In this video, I want to talk to you about lung paralysis and that the theory, it's a strong theory and a theory that I've lived myself, that lung paralysis is a side effect of diabetes. Now, with diabetes, when I had what I'd call extreme type 2 diabetes, was that my muscles were weak, and especially my lungs, and especially that I was always totally exhausted, meaning a lack of oxygen intake. I would walk up the stairs here, 14 stairs, and puff and pant due to a lack of oxygen that I believe was due to lung paralysis while I slept. The diaphragm, I believe, of the esophagus is a flap, a muscle flap, and that muscle flap got weak, causing a lack of oxygen intake, especially during sleep when it becomes worse, and it also causes a reflux, and reflux and lung paralysis are strongly associated together due to the esophagus flap not being able to be kept closed due to weak muscles. So let me tell you that weak muscles also include your eye muscles, so you're going to have bad eyesight as well. Let me tell you that. I'll tell you how it was healed, but I had my esophagus healed by a healer in the spiritualist church. And let me tell you, at the time, I wasn't really into healing. I've seen some significant things done. I've heard about churches in Cuba, the world's drug capital, churches in Cuba, Catholic churches, where people came in wheelchairs and left without the aid of a wheelchair, and the storeroom is full of wheelchairs. But let me tell you, around that time that I was looking into healing, a healer came into the church and he did some healing. I didn't expect anything to happen, but he totally cured my reflux by curing what was his diagnosis. Thank you, Alex. The diagnosis of a weak flap in my esophagus. And he cured the esophagus muscle. But let me tell you how to further overcome lung paralysis. Maybe not in a short-term thing that Alex did for me, which totally cured reflux. It has got to be one of the greatest gifts that I've ever received from Spirit. But let me tell you, a long-term cure of lung paralysis, to cure the weakness of muscles, and the evidence I'm going to give you is in a recent eye test that I had for my driver's license. And you're supposed to have that driver's license eye test every 12 months. I don't know what happened, but my calendar failed in some way, and it was 2 years, which was actually a good thing. It was 2 years, and I'll tell you why in a minute. It was 2 years since I had a diabetic eye test for medical certificate on my driver's license, because for that 2-year period prior to having the eye test, I'd been really into the raw veggies. And I've banged on about it before. Raw veggies, especially spinach leaves, the brushy bits of the top of the broccoli. Didn't eat the stalks because I just felt this gut feeling not to eat the stalks. Later on, some years later, I found out that the stalks in the digestive system are along the lines of a woody digestive. So I ate the brushy bits of the broccoli. Brushy bits of the broccoli were real smooth if I stayed away from sugar. If I didn't stay away from sugar, if I indulged in sugar, it would just take off like a rocket, and you'd want to hope you're pointed in the right direction and not backwards in life to something like, backwards in my life, something like drinking or whatever. It never did, but I haven't drank for years and years. I had one or two up until about a year ago. I was drinking maybe one glass of beer a week, sometimes every fortnight, sometimes only every month. And people would say to me, "Do you drink?" And I had to answer yes, because I do drink, but I don't know whether they were inferring that I get drunk or whatever. But so I said, well, I want to be able to say no, and I can't say no with having just one beer a week or fortnight. So I gave up that one beer a fortnight and really didn't miss it. It was more or less a social or peer pressure type of thing anyway, do you want a beer while I'm up there type of thing. And so I gave that up. And then I jumped into actually replacing it with a Coke. And nowadays I don't really go near Coke. But what I am into is milk, spinach leaf, or the brushy bits of broccoli, the tree tops, so to speak, protein powder, and the protein powder is pea-based, and it's about 85% compared to whey protein, which is 30 or 40% protein. And whey protein that I saw a lot of the bodybuilders getting into in the early days gave you a bit of a podgy stomach. Undigested whey protein maybe, or something like that, or maybe it was digesting too fast and turning into fats because it wasn't used. I'm not exactly certain, but the pea-based, the vegetable-based protein powders, you can also get it in a rice veggie-based protein powder, and it's all around 85%. And what's also important is to buy your protein powder, be it whey protein or pea-based vegetarian protein, veggie protein, with amino acids in it. Let me tell you that when you eat an egg without having amino acids intake, then you will metabolize 28% of the egg. When you have amino acids, you will metabolize 85% of the egg. And let me tell you that having the amino acids, I definitely felt a greater strength. I definitely felt the amino acids acting play. One of the pea-based proteins that I bought had amino acids in it, and it had about 18 amino acids. And I had, in my early years in naturopathy college with the great Professor Michelle Blondell, man, I give thanks to that woman. She taught me some of the most amazing things that I didn't take in at the time, some of them, but are coming into play now, 30 years later, 28 years later. So some of the studies I did on amino acids back in those times, I discovered back in those times by also trying the amino acids myself. I learned that some of them were a laxative, and they put an amino acid in Diet Coke. It's called phenylalanine, and it is definitely a laxative. I don't know why Coca-Cola put it in there. Maybe Pepsi do as well. But I found when I gave up Coca-Cola about 20 years ago, I went through a stage of my life where I gave up all soft drinks, remembering what Michelle Blondell told us about carbonated soft drinks, that they chew your teeth out. I gave up soft drinks for about 2 months, came home late on the bus one night after a huge day, dropped in at the service station to say good day to somebody and get a can of Coke. And I had a diet can of Coke, and it had been about 2 months, and the phenylalanine laxative really kicked in within minutes on my short walk home. So there wasn't any problems, no accidents, but it was let me say it was a tight squeeze on the way home. It was a tight squeeze to get home. So again, about 18 amino acids were in this particular pea-based protein powder that I had bought. It was definitely needed. I tried buying amino acids from the local chemist. They were expensive, and it turned out to be a drink that looked like Gatorade, and I didn't want to encourage kids to be drinking the blue drink, then thinking that it was Gatorade or something. So let me tell you something else that really helped. One of the last and final things, after 2 years, finally getting that driver's medical eye test, you won't believe what I've got to tell you. And I'm not totally certain whether it's healing that always goes on in this house anyway, or whether it was from eating raw veggies for 2 years, heaps and heaps of raw veggies and pea-based protein powder. But my eyesight went from 5 points, they call it. Each point is 0.25. 5 points negative. So my eyesight was 1.25 negative. And the last test 2 years ago, and the test this time was 0.75. That's a 40% improvement. I just could not believe it. And I don't think that the chap who did the eye test, because I'd done it at his clinic over the years, I don't think he could quite believe his eyes either. And he did a particular part of the test, again, the part in taking a photograph of the eye, because I told him when we were looking at the first photograph, I remember the last time I got tested, that there were a couple of blowouts in the vessels, and they explained what the blowouts were caused by. And my eyes looked to be very clear this time in the vessels, etc. And he didn't mention anything, but he asked to do that test again. We looked at the eyes photograph again, that particular part of the test, and it looked I remarked that it looked very, very clear, even compared to the first photograph he'd taken that day, and he agreed. And that might have been the reason he did the photograph again of the eyes, because the first one wasn't quite as clear as the second. Maybe he was more thorough than the younger guy that was there, but it was down in Beanley here at Specsavers. There's lots of Specsavers. The guy that is here at Beanley, Ken at Specsavers, is a fantastic optometrist. That's somebody else, an older guy that I used to take shopping every week, put me on to, etc. He's very, very thorough, and I'm not here to advertise him, but what I am here to tell you is a couple more things that are extremely important associated with diabetes, and how I almost totally cured the diabetes. And I believe, I'm going to say it again, that I believe lung paralysis is a side effect of diabetes, because I always had shortness of breath that I don't have now at all. and I always had fatigue, just unbelievable fatigue, and I had reflux. Now, I believe, despite what fantastic Alex the healer did for me, I believe that the reflux would have cured, and I would have cured that muscle just like I've cured, well, I'm on the road to recovery of curing my eye muscles, which have been weak. Now, because I was getting a stronger and stronger prescription all the time back in the days when I first got diabetes, about 6 or 7 years ago, and they said it was maybe from the stress of my mother's passing, but I sincerely believe it was from eating a lot of sugar at the time, because once I had gotten diabetes, I lost taste of sugar, and I kept putting more and more on. Silly me. So shortness of breath. I couldn't walk up the stairs without just about passing out. I obviously wasn't sleeping properly, and especially due to frequent urination through diabetes. When you have sugar, the body tries to dispel the sugar through urination. And I think I remember back in those early days that before I was diagnosed with diabetes, I decided that I was peeing so much. I don't know how I didn't miss it earlier, but I decided I was peeing so much that I should measure it. And I peed into a bucket that I kept in the toilet cubicle. Um, and I think I filled that bucket in a 24-hour period. And I said, what's wrong with that picture? I knew that I was peeing a lot, because I knew in my early days, in my youth, I worked in a factory where they had a set of very accurate scales. They were quite large for pallets and etc. It was a dog food factory where I was an electrician installing a new machine, and I would weigh myself on the machine before and after going to the toilet, and I found that a pee in the toilet was around 300 milliliters, 300 grams to about 600 grams, and unless it's got glycol in it, it must have been nearly all fluid. Glycol, as you know, the good glycol for cars, for your radiator inhibitor is 1,065 grams per litre, and water, of course, 1 litre is 1,000 milliliters is 1,000 grams. It's the metric system, and it's a very, very good system too, by the Romans, I think it was, hey, or the Japanese. I don't know. It's not important, but I'm not a learned man. But I can tell you absolutely positively that I had shortness of breath, and it was due to not getting a good oxygen intake whilst I slept, especially at the fact that I was frequently urinating, and I had massive amounts of fatigue, like you just wouldn't believe. And lots of other diabetics will tell you the same thing. And all the symptoms are caused by a low oxygen intake. Now, lung paralysis isn't something that the doctors will bang on about in regards to diabetes, a side effect of diabetes. But I'm telling you that lung paralysis is a side effect of diabetes. And once you cure the lung paralysis that they say is incurable, you've got it made. And the veggies, the raw veggies, milk, and protein powder, green veggies were the answer. Now, I have said before in another video that the minerals now grown, green vegetables grown in soils that are absolutely scientifically proven totally depleted of minerals, and I mean totally depleted of minerals. The lovely Professor Michelle Blondell, 28 years ago, told us in the classroom that the vegetables being grown out Gatton Way from Brisbane, in what they referred to as the salad bowl, the soils 28 years ago were totally depleted of minerals. I didn't actually believe it at the time. Being a younger man, I thought things like the farmers shouldn't allow that, or that's just not physically possible, etc. And let me tell you, it was. And it's not up to the farmers. They're not scientists to know how many minerals are meant to be in their soil. You know, when the family farm was handed down 2 generations before, they're not scientists to know how much mineral. So there's been scientists, government scientists, that have run around the whole world and tested the soils in farming soils and come up with the fact that all of the farming soils throughout the entire world are totally depleted in minerals. So those virgin farms, maybe now, I even think that where they've grown lucerne for hay is another place that would be depleted of minerals. What is mad cow's disease caused by? The grasses as well, depleted of minerals. Let me tell you that I cured my diabetes by really getting into minerals. It was a key factor. I was eating hordes of the spinach and stuff that you get out of the groceries stores. But let me tell you, I grew one plant in premium topsoil here and noticed an inconceivable difference in the topsoil, the premium topsoil that I grew that spinach plant compared to the spinach that I'm buying in the shops. So the bottom line is we're going to have to start growing our own spinach and broccoli and green vegetables, vegetables with minerals in them. Selenium especially is all the time that I had diabetes, I kept getting this feeling that my sperm count was low, that my fertility was low. Not that I was using it at all, but in particular for family, etc. I wasn't undergoing any tests, but I just felt that my fertility was low, my steroids were low, and so I followed a path of also getting into natural steroids. There's lots of them. One of them is licorice root, and Western medicine, meaning our physical doctors, will tell you that Western medicine will tell you that licorice root was found in the pyramids and is a sweetener. It's used to sweeten some lollies. I don't know whether it's particularly used for licorice lollies, but it's a sweetener. It is sweet to taste, and Western medicine tell us that it's a sweetener. It's used as a sweetener, and the Egyptians had it in their pyramids because they used it as a sweetener. Now, Eastern medicine, be it the Indians, the Chinese, etc., Eastern medicine tell us that they don't mention at all that it's a sweetener. They do mention that it's sweet, but they say it's a steroid. And let me tell you that if you go to one of the health shops and you get shavings of licorice plant, of the licorice root plant, and put it in a tea, use half the packet per se, your voice goes deep almost within 30 seconds or so of drinking the tea, a strong tea. So it does have a steroidal effect as it passes your voice box. And fennel is something that a singer told me has a steroidal effect, but licorice root powder is cheaper than fennel, and there are an awful lot of other steroids. Let me tell you that I had a spirit here one day talking to me about natural steroids from his country, and he told me this story. I have mentioned it before, but this spirit was here, and he was telling me that the Scots started wearing their sporran, that pouch in their groin area, because they carried 2 things in there that they were particular about. They carried their Scottish material, and they also carried a flower, they carried the Scotch thistle, known as milk thistle, in the chemists and natural shops. Let me tell you that this chap in spirit told me that Scotch thistle was a total secret even to their wives. So if their wives were caught, we know that the English grabbed their wives and tried to outbreed the Scottish by grabbing their wives and stuff. That's a fact, and they wouldn't tell their wives that the Scotch thistle was an incredible steroid, and I tell you, it is. It is a very, very aggressive steroid, though. Ground up Scotch thistle. And it was more or less a secret thing that the Scots had, that they obviously got into before they went into the battlefield. So they were very patriotic about their flag, and I think that maybe some of it was a bit of an act to make out as though that the Scotch thistle flower was just an emblem, but it wasn't. It was more than that. They gave thanks for the Scotch thistle. And their Scottish tartan, which was family orientated for the colours. So there are lots and lots of other steroids, natural steroids, that are very, very good. Some of them just simply improve metabolism, but some of them are sort of improve metabolism, but also have a steroidal effect as well. And one of the other ones, which is very smooth, just like broccoli is very smooth if you stay away from sugar, is peppermint. Not mint, but the Chinese hybrid of mint called peppermint. The Chinese are quite switched on, as we know, with natural medicines, and some of that is being lost nowadays because there's so much study and devotion into Chinese herbalism, and that's a part of herbalism. So natural steroids are something that I got into not to raise my sperm count or my fertility count. I got into it so that I could get back into being a tradie. And the other thing that's been important is riding the e-bike. And if I didn't have the e-bike, I'd be running or jogging. And I'm thinking about giving away the e-bike and getting into running or jogging, which can be a little bit more stressful on your knees and your hips. So the protein powder is extremely important, and just as important is the amino acids. Some of them have a laxative effect, but hey, while I think of it, I've mentioned it before in another video that castor oil gets rid of helps baldness, and is good for a few other things, tumours in women's breasts, to put tissues of castor oil, thanks to Barbara O'Neill, who really is another professor teaching us about natural products, and is a physician, a qualified doctor. She's curing women with castor oil in tissues and in their bra, etc., women's breast tumours. And she mentions tumours in the stomach, the size of a small football and stuff, a junior football type thing, curing those as well. But let me tell you, I put it in my belly button now after I started studying what they call navel pulling, and a few drops in the belly button give a very good laxative progressive effect over a couple of days. Really, really good, as well as curing the baldness. I'm not too fanatical about curing my baldness. I haven't put a great deal on, but I did notice a significant difference after just 3 or 4 applications of a couple of drops. So navel pulling is another way, believe it or not, with castor oil to cure your baldness. Let me tell you that one time I saw Barbara O'Neill talking quite a lot about cayenne pepper, and I have had a motorcycle accident some 30-something years ago when I had the change of my life. I wrote about it in my book called The Holy Grail of Science by Mick Cox. And I put some cayenne pepper in olive oil and put it on my calf muscle to see if the calf muscle would absorb the cayenne pepper and get some circulation happening in that knee. Not that I needed it a great deal. I don't have any problems with my knee. But I wrapped it in Glad Wrap. And let me tell you that it was a winter day, and I put the cayenne pepper, olive oil, and wrapped it in a couple of things of Glad Wrap. And about 10 minutes later, my entire head had gone bright red and was just pouring with sweat. And I had to get that cayenne pepper off real fast. So it's not just navel pulling that's going to do the job. It's applying these types of oils in other places. Let me tell you that in the cooking cupboard, I've had olive oil spray in there, and I've also had coconut oil spray in there. And the brand of coconut oil that I had, the propellant was propane gas. I can't believe it that the propellant to get the oil out of the tin was propane gas, and I don't have coconut oil anymore unless I buy it in a jar from some of those popular grocery stores. But it's a little bit more pricey, and coconut oil is supposed to be good for your heart. So eating coconut is a good thing. But let me tell you, the olive oil. Olive oil is a truly amazing product that has been along the lines of that Scotch thistle. Yeah, let me tell you about olive oil. What country is renowned for having the greatest and most expensive leathers? The Italians. Italian leather shoes, Italian leather lounges are expensive. And let me tell you that one night I decided to try a harebrained idea again, and it wasn't a harebrained idea. I got the olive oil and sprayed it on my shoes. I was sitting there watching some TV for a while, got up and started walking across the floor, and my shoes began to squeak, sounding like expensive shoes. So olive oil is fantastic for your leather. It's a secret that the Italians have had for some time. Now, let me point something out that the other night I sprayed it on my feet. I hate the look of my feet after wearing thongs for a week. When I spend a week at home wearing thongs or so, I don't like to wear thongs out in public. It's just one of those things that I have. I sprayed some olive oil on my feet to look see how it looked. And I thought to myself, what are the Italians and the Greeks renowned for? And that's having olive skin. So don't tell anyone. The olive oil is fantastic for leather. It's obviously fantastic for your body as well. You wouldn't have to put it all over your body. You'd only have to put it on your feet for your body to absorb the olive oil and give you a good complexion. Make you look young like those Italians do. So I'm coming up to the final thing that is actually the most important thing to tell you about my recovery on diabetes. About the last thing that I had lingering around was to get up during the night and to pee, to urinate 2 or 3 times in a night. It was becoming less than 4 or 5 or 6 every hour. On the hour it used to be, but I was still aware that I wasn't getting sleep down into the beta waves, down into those repairing frequencies of sleep that do your mind and body so much good in repairing cells. It's a scientific fact, and it's a fact that everyone's aware of, that good sleep, deep sleep, is repairing something or other in our bodies. We feel so much more refreshed, even after a nanny nap, which I believe gets down into those lower waves. They say that the body can vibrate anywhere between 4 and 1600 hertz. But I've read recently that deep sleep gets down around 2.5 hertz per second. So maybe that's where beta waves are, or whatever the good frequency is of sleep. So that's what was still lingering around, that I was getting up 2 and 3 times a night, still with what you would call frequent urination due to the diabetes, especially if I had something that had a lot of sugar in it the night before. But I just felt the urge to replace my final coffees, with a mineral supplement fizzy tablet. The popular one is Barocca. There are some others that do have more potassium in them. You can't get potassium from the chemist anymore. You can only get it under prescription. And you really should Google some of those YouTube doctors, those medicos, who talk about potassium and the lack of symptoms. And it's quite incredible what potassium is good for. But let me tell you that I replaced my coffee during the day with 2 or 3 coffees with a Barocca and some other brands that I tried. And I was having 2, 3, up to 4 Baroccas a day. And suddenly I realized within 4 or 5 days of taking those Baroccas, I suddenly realized that I wasn't getting up at all. I was sometimes getting up at 6 o'clock, as I usually do. I like to get up fairly early. That's still a late start for a tradie. I'd like to get up fairly. Around 6 o'clock, I would wake up and I would realise that at 7 o'clock, and one particular morning at 8 o'clock, I still hadn't urinated. So those Baroccas with minerals in them were really doing some great work on the diabetes organs, on the organs affected by diabetes. So the answer really is to get into especially potassium. I did a bit of reading, and there's about 9 particular minerals that the body really needs: chromium, potassium, etc. Check them out yourself. And they say that Celtic salt, which is another product that is absolutely fantastic for detoxifying and replenishing minerals, they say that Celtic salt has something like 84 trace minerals in it. So maybe, just maybe, those farmers should be pumping Celtic salt into the soils. Maybe they should be irrigating with liquid Celtic salt. But let me also point out that a lot of the farmers here in Australia, especially here in Australia, use bore water from the artesian basin that we have here in Australia, which they say is starting to dry up. The artesian basin is like a ginormous cavern that's thousands of kilometres long along the eastern side of Australia, and it doesn't exist in any other countries that I know of. And so that artesian basin, the bore water we called it, because we drilled bores into the ground to get it, that bore water was full of minerals. One particular time I was working up at Cloncurry, and I was putting polystyrene cups, plastic cups of water into the freezer overnight. It was extremely hot, like 55 degrees, working outside in the sun in those times, and my body doesn't handle the sun too well. Sorry about that, Brian. But I slackened. I was a bit of a slacker up there. But let me tell you that each morning I would notice that there was salt on top of the cup, and by freezing the water, it pushed the salt to the top of the cup. Quite an extraordinary thing. I thought somebody was, because the fridge freezer was in a communal area outside the rooms, like shearers' sheds rooms. I thought that somebody was sprinkling salt, and the only thing that stopped me from saying something was that it was quite large pieces of salt, like rock salt, and I'd never seen rock salt in those earlier days as as a young tradesman. So it was just a mystery. But what I eventually worked out, I think Wally, our local bobcat driver, might have told me that the salt gets pushed to the surface from the bore water that we were drinking. So the question also arises that are the cattle and sheep, is mad cow's disease caused by bore water, by water that's pulled out of the earth that's just got too many minerals or too much of one particular mineral? Maybe not even a mineral that's readily available here on the surface. Is it possible? So anyway, what I really needed to say in this video is to talk about the fizzy mineral drinks, the tablet. Barocca is one brand. There's lots of other brands. Hydrolyte is another. I just remember now, I was using Hydrolyte as well. And some of them contain more potassium than the other. And let me tell you that I was having 3, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those Hydrolytes and Baroccas in every day. Somebody said to me, you shouldn't be taking as many of those as you are because it can be bad for you. But hey, would you rather be seen? I'm sure you wouldn't say anything if you saw me drinking that red stuff or that all those other drinks that people are proving are really bad for you, causing diabetes. So they were good. They stopped me from urinating during the night, the frequent urination. And so whatever was happening there, it was getting my bladder together. Maybe it was getting that gland to work that squirts insulin naturally in our bodies, etc. So anyway, that's let me say one more last thing that my partner and her mother went away on a cruise and suffered from some sort of food poisoning or something. I don't know exactly what it was, but her mother was really ill and had really, really bad diarrhea for days, so bad that she was so weak that she couldn't walk off of the ship. They put her in a wheelchair, and my partner, that's right, my partner didn't go on the cruise. My partner went to pick her up, and she was wheeled off in a wheelchair, and in a panic, she told her that she couldn't stop the diarrhea, and my partner took her to the chemist and got some Hydrolyte, and the Hydrolyte cured the diarrhea, which was all that was left over remaining from the bad food or whatever it was, salmonella. I don't know exactly what it was, but these things happen on cruises. So let me say one last thing. There is a personal water pump available that does about 400 or 600 milliliters and purifies your water. You should be taking that to places like Bali. And I got food poisoning from a town here in Australia whose water supply got in an ingress of flood water when it got really bad in the floods, and it was left in the taps. I drank from the tap before we left the motel in the morning and really bad food poisoning from the water in the tap. And I went to the hospital so bad, and they gave me about 2 or 3 litres of water through an IV. So that diarrhea for my partner's mother was cured by Hydrolyte. Of course, Barocca would do the same thing. And Hydrolyte is all about replenishing your electrolytes. So electrolytes are minerals. And so minerals are important. Lots and lots of people nowadays are getting cramps, and magnesium is an important one to give to, and there are over a dozen magnesiums, and magnesium glycinate is the hardest one to get a hold of, and it is the very best, magnesium glycinate. Let me also mention before I press stop that that manganese is no longer available off the shelf. And they do talk a lot about manganese toxicity through too much manganese. But go and check out the videos on the symptoms of deficiency of manganese. It is just absolutely mind-blowing, especially in the women's reproductive area. So remember that manganese is one of those minerals that are depleted in the soils in the entire world, not just here in the salad bowl, etc. And so no big deal. Don't hound the farmers about getting their soils back to nature again. Supplement yourself with the minerals, and by supplementing yourself with the minerals, you aren't handing your body over to somebody. You're finding out what your body does, because everybody is different. Everybody's body is different as well. Anyhow, there it is. 46 minutes. I expected to be half that time, but there are some important things that I've told you, and especially to tell you that it's undiagnosed that a side effect of diabetes is lung paralysis. And lung paralysis, one of the symptoms of lung paralysis is fatigue, is weakened muscles, and weakened muscles that aren't oxygenated when you're sleeping in the deep sleep beta waves. So the esophagus and reflux causes disturbed sleep. And of course, with diabetes, frequent urinating causes a lack of good sleep. And that's just about it. So they say that there is two different cases of the esophagus flap, muscle flap being weak. There is the bilateral, where both sides of the esophagus, or the diaphragm, is weak, and they call that bilateral. And then the other one is what I had, ilateral or something, and it's just one side of the diaphragm that is weak. And mine was cured in the short term, cured immediately, all overnight, because I wasn't getting up and having reflux running to the sink during the night. Alex, the healer, cured us in the church. It wasn't an official church night, but Alex came and visited. He did some marvelous work on lots of other people as well. So don't forget, have the faith, and that's not just faith, that's absolute evidence. I saw him cure some other things as well. That healing is absolutely, totally for real. Oh, hey, check out Charlie Goldsmith. I should have mentioned him right from the start. Charlie Goldsmith does some absolutely incredible stuff. He spent something like just over 30 years as in a voluntary basis of healing, and nowadays he's running courses, paid courses, and etc. I'm telling you that my diabetes improved from watching some of his talks and etc. One totally amazing man. If anyone was going to be a reincarnation of Jesus, it's Charlie Goldsmith, I'll tell you. He's an amazing man. It's late. It's 5 to 9. These videos are wearing me out a bit lately due to a lack of oxygen intake. I've got to get back into the bike or some proper breathing. Again, the e-bike, pedal like heck, and do some kilometres. I did one long trip, 80-something kilometres across the New South Wales border on an e-bike. But when you're pedaling on an e-bike, have short bursts of pedaling real hard and get that heart pumping and the lungs going. E-bikes really are fantastic. So there we are. I hope my little microphone, it looked like it lasted. It's still the 1st of January 2025 at the moment. And I wish you all of you, all the very best for this year, the start of this year. I hope these couple of videos I've made today have been good and helped some people. I'm sure they will. Bye now, and blessings to all.